Raw image format. A camera raw image file contains minimally processed data from the image sensor of either a digital camera, a motion picture film scanner, or other image scanner. Raw files are named so because they are not yet processed and therefore are not ready to be printed or edited with a bitmap graphics editor. Normally, the image is processed by a raw converter in a wide gamut internal color space where precise adjustments can be made before conversion to a positive file format such as TIFF or Jpeg for storage, printing, or further manipulation. There are dozens of raw formats in use by different manufacturers of digital image capture equipment. Rationale. Raw image files are sometimes incorrectly described as digital negatives, but neither are they negatives, nor do the unprocessed files constitute visible images. Rather, the raw datasets are more like exposed but undeveloped film which can be converted electronically, developed in a non-destructive manner multiple times in observable, reversible steps to reach a visually desired image. With exposed film, development is a single event that physically transforms the unexposed film irreversibly. Like undeveloped photographic film, a raw digital image may have a wider dynamic range or color gamut than the developed film or print. Unlike physical film after development, the raw file preserves the information captured at the time of exposure. The purpose of raw image formats is to save, with minimum loss of information, data obtained from the sensor. Raw image formats are intended to capture the radiometric characteristics of the scene, that is, physical information about the light intensity and color of the scene at the best of the camera sensor's performance. Most raw image file formats store information sensed according to the geometry of the sensor's individual photoreceptive elements, sometimes called pixels, rather than points in the expected final image. Sensors with hexagonal element displacement, for example, record information for each of their hexagonally displaced cells, which a decoding software will eventually file contents. Raw files contain the information required to produce a viewable image from the camera's sensor data. The structure of raw files often follows a common pattern. A short file header, which typically contains an indicator of the byte ordering of the file, a file identifier, and an offset into the main file data. Camera sensor metadata, which is required to interpret the sensor image data, including the size of the sensor, the attributes of the CFA and its color profile. Image metadata, which can be useful for inclusion in any CMS environment or database. These include the exposure settings, camera/scanner/lens model, date, and optionally, place of shoot/scan, authoring information, and other. Some raw files contain a standardized metadata section with data in Exif format. An image thumbnail. Most raw files contain a full-size Jpeg conversion of the image, which is used to preview the file on the camera's LCD panel. In the case of motion picture film scans, either the timecode, keycode, or frame number in the file sequence which represents the frame sequence in a scan reel. This item allows the file to be ordered in a frame sequence without relying on its file name. The sensor image data. Many raw file formats, including IAQ Phase 1, 3 FR Hasselblad, DCR, K25 KDC Codec, CRW CR2 CR3 Canon, ERF Epson, MEF Mamiya, Mossleaf, NEF NRW Nikon, ORF Olympus, PF Pentax, RW2 Panon. These files may deviate from the TIFF standard in a number of ways, including the use of a non-standard file header, the inclusion of additional image tags, and the encryption of some of the tag data. Panasonic's raw converter corrects geometric distortion and chromatic aberration on such cameras as the LX3, with necessary correction information presumably included in the raw. Phase 1's raw converter capture 1 also offers corrections for geometrical distortion, chromatic aberration, purple fringing, and keystone correction, emulating the shift capability of tilt shift in software and specially designed hardware on most raw files from over 100 different cameras. The same holds for Canon's DPP application at least for all more expensive cameras like all EOS DSLRs and the G series of compact cameras. DNG, the Adobe Digital Negative format, is an extension of the TIFF 6.0 format and is compatible with TIFF/EP and uses various open formats and / or standards, including Exif metadata, XMP metadata, IPT metadata, CIE XYZ coordinates, ICC profiles, and Jpeg. Sensor image data. In digital photography, the RAW file plays the role that photographic film plays in film photography. RAW files thus contain the full resolution, typically 12 or 14-bit data, as readout from each of the camera's image sensor pixels. The camera's sensor is almost invariably overlaid with a color filter array CFA, usually a Bayer filter consisting of a mosaic of a Tuxedo matrix of red, green, blue, and second green filters. One variation on the Bayer filter is the RGB filter of the Sony CyberShot DSC-828, which exchanged the green in the RG rose with emerald, a blue-green, or cyan color. Other sensors, such as the Foveon X3 sensor, capture information directly in RGB form using 3-pixel sensors in each location. This RGB raw data still needs to be processed to make an image file because the raw RGB values correspond to the responses of the sensors, not to a standard color space like sRGB. As there is no Bayer or other mosaic, there is no need for demosaic. Flatbed and film scanner sensors are typically straight narrow RGB or RGBI, where I stands for the additional infrared channel for automatic dust removal strips that are swept across an image. The HDRI raw data format is able to store the infrared raw data, which can be used for infrared cleaning, as an additional 16-bit channel. The remainder of the discussion about raw files applies to them as well. Some scanners do not allow the host system access to the raw data at all as a speed compromise. The raw data are processed very rapidly inside the scanner to select out the best. To obtain an image from a raw file, this mosaic of data must be converted into standard RGB form. This is often referred to as raw development. When converting from the 4-sensor Tuxedo Bayer matrix raw form into RGB pixels, the green pair is used to control the luminance detail of the processed output pixel, while the red and blue, which each have half as many samples, are used mostly for the more slowly varying chroma component of the image. If raw format data is available, it can be used in high dynamic range imaging conversion as a simpler alternative to the multi-exposure HDI approach of capturing 3 separate images, one underexposed, one correct, and one overexposed, and overlaying one on top of the other. Standardization. Providing a detailed and concise description of the content of raw files is highly problematic. There is no single raw format. Formats can be similar or radically different. Different manufacturers use their own proprietary and typically undocumented formats, which are collectively known as raw format. Often they also change the format from one camera model to the next. Several major camera manufacturers, including Nikon, Canon, and Sony, encrypt portions of the file in an attempt to prevent third-party tools from accessing them. This industry-wide situation of inconsistent formatting has concerned many photographers who worry. The availability of high-quality open-source software, which decodes raw image formats, particularly DCRAW, has helped to alleviate these concerns. An essay by Michael Reichman and Juwajan Specht stated here are 2 solutions: the adoption by the camera industry of a public documentation of RAW-SIC formats, past, present, and future, or, more likely, B, adoption of a universal RAW-SIC format. Planning for U.S. Library of Congress collections identifies raw file formats as less desirable file formats and identifies DNG as a suggested alternative. DNG is the only raw image format for which industry-wide buy-in is being sought. It is based upon and compatible with the ISO standard raw image format ISO 12234-2, TIFF/EP, and is being used by ISO in their revision of that standard. The ISO standard raw image format is ISO 12234-2, better known as TIFF/EP. TIFF/EP also supports non-raw or processed images. TIFF/EP provided a basis for the raw image formats of a number of cameras. For example, Nikon's NEF RAW files are based on TIFF/EP and include a tag which identifies the version of TIFF/EP they are based on. Adobe's DNG RAW file format was based on TIFF/EP, and the DNG specification states DNG is compatible with the TIFF/EP standard. Several cameras use DNG as their raw image format, so in that limited sense they use TIFF/EP too. Adobe Systems launched this DNG raw image format in September 2004. By September 2006, several camera manufacturers had started to announce support for DNG in newer camera models, including Leica, Samsung, Ricoh, Pentax, Hasselblad native camera support, and Better Light Export. The Leica digital model or DMR was first to use DNG as its native format. In September 2009, Adobe stated that there were no known intellectual property encumbrances or license requirements for DNG. There is a digital negative DNG specification patent license, but it does not actually state that there are any patents held on DNG, and the September 2009 statement was made at least 4 years after this license was published. TIFF/EP began its 5-year revision cycle in 2006. Adobe offered the DNG specification to ISO to be part of ISO revised TIFF/EP standard. A progress report in October 2008 from ISO about the revision of TIFF/EP stated, TIF extension and IP2 for raw image data. Data. DNG extension. It is IP2 that is relevant here. A progress report in September 2009 states that this format will be similar to DNG 1.3, which serves as the starting point for development. DNG has been used by open source developers. Use by camera makers varies. The largest companies such as Canon, Nikon, Sony, and some others do not use DNG. Smaller companies and makers of niche cameras who might otherwise have difficulty getting support from software companies frequently use DNG as their native raw image format. Pentax uses DNG as an optional alternative to their own raw image format. There are 15 or more such companies, even including a few that specialize in movie cameras. In addition, most Canon point and shoot cameras can support DNG by using CHDK. Canon RAW V2, CR2, is mostly based on TIFF and lossless Jpeg ITU-KT1. Canon RAW V3, CR3 is based on ISO base media file format ISO/IEC 14496-12 with custom tags and unknown CRX codec. Processing benefits. Nearly all digital cameras can process the image from the sensor into a Jpeg file using settings for white balance, color saturation, contrast, and sharpness that are either selected automatically or entered by the photographer before taking the picture. Cameras that produce RAW files save these settings in the file, but defer the processing. This results in an extra step for the photographer, so RAW is normally only used when additional computer processing is intended. However, RAW has numerous advantages over JPEG, such as many more shades of colors compared to JPEG files. RAW files have 12 or 14 bits of intensity information per channel, 4096 minus 16,384 shades, compared to JPEG's gamma compressed 8 bits, 256 shades. Higher image quality. Because all the calculations, such as applying gamma correction, demisacing, white balance, brightness, contrast, etc., used to generate pixel values in RGB format for most images, are performed in one step on the base data, the resultant pixel values will be more accurate and exhibit less posterization. bypassing of undesired steps in the camera's processing, including sharpening and noise reduction. JPEG images are typically saved using a lossy compression format, though a lossless JPEG compression is now available. RAW formats typically use lossless compression or high-quality lossy compression. Finer control. RAW conversion software allows users to manipulate more parameters such as lightness, white balance, hue, saturation, etc., and do so with greater variability. For example, the white point can be set to any value, not just discrete preset values like daylight or incandescent. Furthermore, the user can typically see a preview while adjusting these parameters. The color space can be set to whatever is desired. Different demospace algorithms can be used, not just the one coded into the camera. The contents of RAW files include more information and potentially higher quality than the converted results, in which the rendering parameters are fixed, the color gamut is clipped, and there may be quantization and compression artifacts. Large transformations of the data, such as increasing the exposure of a dramatically underexposed photo, result in fewer visible artifacts when done from raw data than when done from already rendered image files. Raw data leave more scope for both corrections and artistic manipulations, without resulting in images with visible flaws such as posterization. All the changes made on a raw image file are non-destructive. That is, only the metadata that controls the rendering is changed to make different output versions, leaving the original data unchanged. To some extent, raw format photography eliminates the need to use the HRI technique, allowing a much better control over the mapping of the scene intensity range into the output tonal range, compared to the process of automatically mapping to JPEG or other 8-bit representation. Drawbacks. Camera RAW file size is typically 6 times larger than JPEG file size. While use of RAW formats avoids the compression artifacts inherent in JPEG, fewer images can fit on a given memory card. However, the large sizes and low prices of modern memory cards mitigate this. Burst mode shooting tends to be slower and shorter due to the larger file size. Most RAW formats implement lossless data compression to reduce the size of the files without affecting image quality. But some others use lossy data compression, where quantization and filtering is performed on the image data. Sony's lossy 11 plus 7-bit delta compression of raw data causes posterization under certain conditions. Several Nikon cameras let photographers choose between no compression, lossless compression, or lossy compression for their raw images. Red Digital Cinema Camera Company introduced R3 Red Code RAW with compression ratio from 3:1 to 18:1, which depends on resolution and frame rates. The standard RAW image format ISO 12234-2 TIFF/EP is not widely accepted. DNG, the potential candidate for a new standard format, has not been adopted by many major camera companies. See Standardization section. Numerous different RAW formats are currently in use, and new RAW formats keep appearing, while others are abandoned. Because of the lack of widespread adoption of a standard RAW format, more specialized software may be required to open RAW files than for standardized formats like JPEG or TIFF. Software developers have to frequently update their products to support the RAW formats of the latest cameras, but open source implementations like DCRAW make it easier. The time taken in the image workflow is an important factor when choosing between raw and ready-to-use image formats. With modern photo editing software, the additional time needed to process raw images has been greatly reduced, but it still requires an extra step in workflow in comparison with using out-of-camera JPEGs. Software support. Operating system support. Apple macOS and iOS. In January 2005. In April 2005, Apple's OS X 10.4 brought RAW support to the operating system's Image I/O framework, enabling RAW support automatically in the majority of macOS applications, both from Apple such as Preview, macOS PDF and image viewing application, and Aperture, a photo post-production software package. Semi-regular updates to macOS generally include updated support for new RAW formats introduced in the intervening months by camera manufacturers. In 2016, Apple announced that iOS 10 would allow capturing RAW images on selected hardware, and third-party applications will be able to edit RAW images through the operating system's core image framework. In 2020, Apple released the iPhone 12 Pro and iPhone 12 Pro Max. Both of these devices support Apple Pro RAW as of iOS 14.3. Pro RAW photos are 12-bit DNG files. Microsoft Windows Camera Codec Pack. Microsoft supplies the free Windows Camera Codec Pack for Windows XP and later versions of Microsoft Windows to integrate RAW file viewing and printing into some Microsoft Windows tools. The codecs allow native viewing of RAW files from a variety of specific cameras in Windows Explorer/File Explorer and Windows Live Photo Gallery/Windows Photo Gallery in Windows Vista and Windows 7. As of October 2016, Microsoft had not released an updated version since April 2014, which supported some specific cameras by the following manufacturers: Canon, Casio, Epson, Fujifilm, Kodak, Konica Minolta, Leica, Nikon, Olympus, Panasonic, Pentax, Samsung, and Sony. For Windows 10, this was essentially replaced in 2019 by Microsoft RAW Image Extension. RAW Image Extension. Microsoft as of 2019 supplies the free RAW Image Extension for Windows 10 and later versions of Microsoft Windows to integrate RAW file viewing and printing into some Microsoft Windows tools. The extension allows native viewing of RAW files from many mid to high-end digital cameras in Windows Explorer/File Explorer and Microsoft Photos. Windows Imaging Component WIC. Microsoft Windows supports the Windows Imaging Component WIC codec standard. WIC was available as a standalone downloadable program for Windows XP Service Pack 2 and built into Windows XP Service Pack 3, Windows Vista, and later versions. Windows Explorer/File Explorer and Windows Live Photo Gallery/Windows Photo Gallery can view RAW formats for which the necessary WIC codecs are installed. Canon, Nikon, Sony, Olympus, and Pentax have released WIC codecs for their cameras, although some manufacturers only provide codec support for the 32. Commercial DNG WIC codecs are also available from Artfree Imaging and others, and Fast Picture Viewer Professional installs a set of WIC-enabled image decoders. Android Lollipop 5.0, introduced in late 2014, can allow smartphones to take RAW images, useful in low-light situations. Free and open-source software. Darktable is a RAW workflow tool for macOS, Microsoft Windows, Linux, and other open Unix-like operating systems. The software features native 32-bit floating-point processing and a plug-in architecture. DCRAW is a program which reads most RAW formats and can be made to run on operating systems not supported by most commercial software such as Unix. LibRaw is an API library based on DCRAW, offering a more convenient interface for reading and converting RAW files. HDR Photo Studio and AZ Image are some of the commercial applications that use LibRaw. JRAO is another API library written in pure Java code and compliant to the standard Java Image I/O API. DigiCam is an advanced digital photo management application for Linux, Microsoft Windows, and Mac OS X that supports RAW processing. Exif Tool supports the reading, writing, and editing of metadata in RAW image files. Exif Tool supports many different types of metadata, including EXIF, GPS, IPT, XMP, JFIF, GeoTIFF, ICC Profile, Photoshop IRB, FlashPix, AFP, and ID3, as well as the maker notes of many digital cameras. ImageMagick, a software suite for image manipulation and conversion, reads many different RAW file formats. ImageMagick is available for Linux/Unix, macOS, Microsoft Windows, and other platforms. LightZone is a photo editing program providing the ability to edit many RAW formats natively. Most tools are RAW converters, but LightZone allows a user to edit a RAW file as if it were TIFF or Jpeg. The project was discontinued in September 2011 and reinstated as an open-source project in December 2012. RAW Studio is a RAW format developer. RAW Therapy is a RAW developer supporting Linux, OS X, and Microsoft Windows operating systems. It features a native 32-bit floating-point pipeline. Shotwell is an image organizer available for all major operating systems with the ability to view and edit RAW images and has built-in social networking upload capability. UFRAW is a front-end which uses DCRAW as a back-end. It can be used as a GIMP plugin and is available for most operating systems. Proprietary software. In addition to those listed under operating system support above, the commercial software described below support RAW formats. Dedicated RAW converters. The following products were launched as RAW processing software to process a wide range of RAW files and have this as their main purpose. Adobe Camera Raw, used internally by various Adobe products for RAW processing, and as the RAW engine in Lightroom. Adobe Photoshop Lightroom, Corel Aftershot Pro, formerly Bibble Pro, Capture One, DxO Photo Lab, formerly DxO Optics Pro. Hasselblad's focus relies on operating system support to process non-Hasselblad files. Photo Ninja, Silkipix Developer Studio, Magic Raw, Anon, RAW Power, a macOS RAW processing application, and Apple Photos extension. Others. ACDC Pro is photo management and editing software that supports the RAW formats of 21 camera manufacturers. Adobe Photoshop supports RAW formats as of version CS2. Affinity Photo supports RAW formats. Blackmagic designed DaVinci Resolve. DNG Viewer is a free 32-bit viewer for Microsoft Windows based on DCRAW. The very simple viewer is installed as RAW Image Viewer, supports some lossless operations, and can save RAW images as BMP, JPEG, PNG, or TIFF. Fast RAW Viewer is a dedicated RAW viewer that runs on Mac and Microsoft Windows and currently claims to support all RAW formats except Fovean. Helicon Filter supports RAW formats. IrfanView is a freeware/shareware basic editor with support for RAW files. Converter support for RAW formats is based on DCRAW. Paint Shop Pro contains RAW support, although as in the case of most editors, updates to the program may be necessary to attain compatibility with newer RAW formats as they are released. PhotoLine supports RAW formats. Picasa Development discontinued is a free editor and organizer from Google. It can read and display many RAW formats, but like iPhoto, Picasa provides only limited tools for processing the data in a RAW file. Silver B&W Photo Converter offers basic support for editing RAW file formats supported by macOS. Silver Fast supports RAW formats. Beautiful Photo Organizer is a photo organizing app for iPhone and iPad that supports RAW formats, i.e. it can store and display RAW formats but also export them in the original RAW format as well. Wild Media Server UPnP DLNA HTTP support for RAW formats is based on LibRaw. Transloaded is a software as a service that supports converting RAW files into other formats. XenView support for RAW formats is mostly based on DCRAW. HTML5 browser-based apps. A new class of RAW file processing tools appeared with the development of HTML5 rich Internet applications. RAWPix. HEO is able to render and apply basic adjustments to RAW and DNG files. RAW file name extensions and respective camera manufacturers or standard. RAW bitmap files. Less commonly, RAW may also refer to a generic image file format containing only pixel color values. For example, Photoshop RAW files. RAW contain 8 bits per channel RGB data in top to bottom, left to right pixel order. Dimensions must be input manually when such files are reopened, or a square image is assumed. Due to its simplicity, this format is very open and compatible, though limited by its lack of metadata and run length encoding, especially in photography and graphic design, where color management and extended gamuts are important and large images are common.